Here's something wild. The language spoken by the most Filipinos, the one with more native speakers than any other, is not the national language of the Philippines. And the people who speak it, they've been furious about it for almost 90 years. We're talking about Cebuano, the Bisaya language, around 21 to 25 million native speakers. And in 1937, one man, one decision basically said, "Nah, not you." And that one decision, it cracked this country in two. By the end of this video, you're going to understand exactly why it happened, who benefited, and why linguists, historians, and Bisaya speakers are still fighting about it today. And trust me, once you know the full story, you're going to have opinions. Okay, so to understand this whole mess, we gotta go way back, like 3000 BCE back. The Austronesian people migrated from Taiwan down through the Philippine archipelago, and over thousands of years, two very distinct civilizations emerged. The Tagalogs settled in Luzon, mostly inland, agrarian, feudal, and the Visayans, the Bisaya people, they settled the Central Islands, and they were different, very different. See, Tagalog society was predominantly agrarian and feudal, structured around rice farming, the Datu nobility, and the land. The Visayans, though, they were coastal, they were maritime traders, and they had this wild warrior culture. They had their own class system, the Datu at the top, then the Tamawa, the warrior freemen, and the Alipin, the dependency class. They were raiding each other's villages, trading gold, and sailing all across Southeast Asia. These were not simple people. And here's the thing, the Tagalogs and Visayans, they actually weren't big rivals back then. Their real rivals were each other's geographic neighbors. The Tagalogs competed with the Kapampangans over control of the Manila Bay area and the river basins of central Luzon. The Visayans had their own inter-island politics. They traded, they raided, they lived their lives. There was no grand Tagalog versus Bisaya war, not yet. But then, in 1565, a Spanish conquistador named Miguel López de Legazpi sailed his fleet into the island of Cebu, Bisaya territory, and established the very first permanent Spanish settlement in the Philippines. Not Manila, not Luzon, Cebu. The capital of the Spanish Philippines, in the beginning, was literally a Bisaya city. Legazpi built his base in Cebu. He made peace with the local Datu, Tupas, the chief of Cebu. And for 6 years, Cebu was the HQ of all Spanish activity in the Philippines. But then, and this is where it gets politically interesting, in 1571, Legazpi moved the capital, north, to Manila, to Tagalog territory. And that single geographic decision, it set off a chain reaction that's still playing out today. All right, real quick, I gotta ask you something. Where are you from? Are you Tagalog, Bisaya, or neither? Drop it in the comments right now, because honestly, your answer might change how you feel about what I'm about to tell you. Go, I'll wait. So here's where it gets really interesting. When the Spanish set up Manila as the capital, they centralized everything there. Trade, government, the church hierarchy, all of it flowed through Manila, which was Tagalog territory. And the Spanish? They did something clever and kind of diabolical. They actually used Visayan soldiers to help conquer Manila in 1570. Martín de Goiti led that campaign, and then basically said, "Thanks, bye," and gave the Tagalogs the political real estate. And the Visayans who helped them? They ended up as foot soldiers in the colonial machine. The Spanish used Bisaya warriors as auxiliary troops to pacify other islands, sending them north, south, east. It was a classic colonial playbook. Use one group to control another, then keep both groups just divided enough that they never team up against you. Honestly, genius and terrible at the same time. Meanwhile, the Spanish missionaries were doing something else entirely. They were learning the local languages to convert people. And here's a wild fact. The Jesuits and Augustinians who went to the Visayas actually became fluent in Cebuano. They wrote dictionaries, they wrote grammars, they wrote religious texts in Bisaya. The very first books published in the Philippines were in multiple Philippine languages, and Cebuano was among the prominent ones. The Bisaya language was documented before Filipino nationalism even existed as an idea. So by the time Spain's grip started to slip in the late 1800s, 333 years of colonial rule, the Philippines was a patchwork of distinct regional identities. Tagalogs in Luzon, Cebuanos and Hiligaynon speakers in the Visayas, Ilocanos in the north, Maguindanao in Mindanao. And the revolutionary firebrands, Jose Rizal, Bonifacio, Aguinaldo, they were mostly Tagalog. The national heroes came from Luzon, and that's not a coincidence. Quickfire round. Did you know the word Bisaya was not even used by the Visayan people themselves before colonization? The Spanish coined it as a collective label. Did you know Cebuano has been spoken continuously for over 3,000 years on those islands? Did you know the Bisaya were seafaring traders who had contact with Borneo, Java, and China centuries before Europeans arrived? Yeah, these people were plugged in. Okay, now we hit the moment everyone's been waiting for. 1937. The Philippines is a commonwealth, still under American supervision, but building toward independence. President Manuel L. Quezon, a Tagalog from Tayabas, modern-day Quezon Province, has a problem. The country has over 100 languages. You need a national language to build a unified nation, so he establishes the Institute of National Language through Commonwealth Act No. 184 in 1936. Now, here is where it gets spicy. The institute was supposed to evaluate all the major Philippine languages and pick the best one to be the national language. And the Bisaya representatives? They argued, and they were right, that Cebuano had more native speakers than Tagalog. Cebuano dominated the central and southern Philippines. It had linguistic depth, literature, documentation. By the pure logic of which language do the most people already speak, Cebuano should have won. But here's what actually happened. The Institute chose Tagalog. On November 9, 1937, they formally recommended it. And on December 30, 1937, Quezon signed Executive Order No. 134, making Tagalog the basis of the national language. The stated reason? Tagalog was spoken in Manila, the seat of government. It was the language of administration. It had the most developed written literature and was geographically central. Practical reasons. Bureaucratic reasons. But the real reason, the elephant in the room that historians have pointed to for decades? Quezon was from Tagalog territory. His political base was in Luzon. Making Tagalog the national language cemented political and cultural power in Manila, in Tagalog hands, for generations to come. Was it purely practical? Or was it a political power play dressed up in the language of nationalism? That's the question that's been haunting the Philippines ever since. Okay, I want you to imagine this for a second. You speak a language. 21 million people speak your language. And then some guy who happens to speak a different language that has slightly fewer native speakers gets elected president. And he goes, yeah, you know what? We're going to make my language the national one. And your language, your culture, your identity, your way of communicating everything you've ever known gets ranked second. How do you feel? Yeah, that's how Cebuano speakers felt. The reaction from the Visayas was immediate and fierce. Bisaya politicians, educators, and intellectuals pushed back hard. They argued the decision was undemocratic, ethnocentric, and culturally imperialist. Ironically, using the same language of liberation they'd been fighting Spain with. And this wasn't just talk. The opposition to Tagalog as the national language went on for decades. Well into the 1950s, 60s, 70s, Cebuano advocates were still fighting. And here's something that doesn't get talked about enough. There were schools in Cebu that banned Tagalog as a medium of instruction, not as protest, but as a practical matter of local governance. Because when you impose a language on kids who don't speak it at home, you're not just teaching them vocabulary, you're cutting them off from their own parents, their own grandparents, their own oral history. Linguists call this language displacement, and it has measurable psychological effects: confusion, shame, identity fracture. The 1973 Constitution under Marcos tried to partially address it, introducing the concept of Filipino as a new national language that would supposedly draw from all Philippine languages. Then, the 1987 Constitution doubled down on this, officially calling Filipino the national language and mandating that it be developed and enriched by all Philippine languages. Sounds great, right? Inclusive, democratic, respectful of diversity. Except, linguists mostly agree that in practice, Filipino is still just Tagalog with extra steps. Let's talk actual numbers for a second, because this is wild. According to the 2020 Philippine Census and Linguistic Surveys, Tagalog is the most widely spoken language at home, about 39.9% of households. But Cebuano? It's spoken by about 22 to 25% of the population as a native language. That's roughly 21 to 25 million people. Cebuano is actually the language with the highest number of native speakers per individual, making it arguably the most organically spoken language in the country. The gap? Smaller than most people think. Here's where we bring the science in, because this isn't just history, it's neuroscience. Your first language, your mother tongue, is literally wired into your brain differently than any language you learn later. It's processed in the Broca's area and Wernicke's area, but it activates deeper emotional and autobiographical memory regions too. When you think in your native language, you're not just communicating, you're being yourself. So when a government tells you your language is second tier, on a neurological level, it's telling you yourself is second tier. And this isn't just philosophy. Studies on multilingual communities around the world have found that when a minority language is suppressed in schools and government, communities experience higher rates of what researchers call linguistic shame. People begin to feel embarrassed speaking their mother tongue, especially in formal or public settings. Over time, younger generations can lose fluency in their own native language. That's not culture clash, that's cultural erosion. And in the Philippines, you can see it happening in real time. Fast forward to today, and the Tagalog-Bisaya rivalry is alive and absolutely thriving, mostly on the internet. Filipino social media is full of debates, memes, regional jokes, and genuine arguments about language, representation, and identity. The tension isn't always serious. A lot of it is good-natured ribbing, honestly. But underneath the surface, there's real feeling, real frustration. When Bisaya speakers go to Manila and are mocked for their accent, when government services are only in Filipino, when entertainment, media, and news is overwhelmingly Tagalog-centric. And here's the thing that most people outside the Philippines don't understand. This isn't just a language argument. It's an argument about representation, about power, about who gets to define what Filipino means. Because Cebuano speakers are not a tiny minority. They are the second largest language group in the Philippines, arguably the largest native language group, and they've been told for nearly 90 years that their language, their culture, their way of being Filipino is officially secondary. So here's the answer to the question we started with. Why did Cebuano, the language with arguably the most native speakers, lose to Tagalog? Not because it was inferior, not because Tagalog speakers were smarter or louder or better. It was geography. It was timing. It was the fact that the capital happened to be in Tagalog territory and the president happened to be Tagalog. Power has a language, and in the Philippines in 1937, power spoke Tagalog. That's the uncomfortable truth. The whole rivalry, 400 years of it, boils down to one thing. Whoever controls the center controls the story. But here's what makes this story so fascinating and, honestly, kind of hopeful. The debate is finally changing. Young Filipinos on both sides are reclaiming their regional identities with pride, not shame. Cebuano YouTube channels are exploding. Bisaya content is going viral. The 1987 Constitution already says Filipinos should be enriched by all Philippine languages, and slowly, linguists and educators are pushing to make that real. The question isn't whether Tagalog or Bisaya wins. It's whether the Philippines can finally build a national identity that makes room for everyone. And that, my friends, is 400 years of tension in about 10 minutes. If you're Bisaya, Tagalog, or somewhere in between, or honestly, if you're from anywhere in the world where your language or culture has ever been sidelined, I think you felt something in this video. That's the point. Because language isn't just how we talk, it's how we exist. Now, if you want to go even deeper, we've got another banger coming up. The history of the Philippines you were never taught in school. Click that. You're going to want to see it.